Pulse of Silence by TheBeckster, Chapter 27. General, Senator, we're coming up on Mustafar, Rex called over his shoulder. The planet loomed in the view screen, glowing red and orange against the blackness of space. Rex searched for large land masses, but all he could see were some darker, cool spots amidst the glow. He heard the other two come up behind him. What do we know about Mustafar? General Kenobi asked. Rex pulled up the information he could from the ship's database. The planet's almost all volcanic. The Techno-Union has been mining the minerals from the lava for years now. Rex paused as the ship's scanner pinned at him, highlighting a point on the hollow of Mustafar. That seems to be the primary base for the mining operations. It's attached to a large refinery. Anakin's there, Obi-Wan confirmed. Plot course, Rex. The clone data's told and programmed in the coordinates. The ship's autopilot took over the approach. What's the atmosphere like? Anidala asked. Type 2, moderately toxic. The rocks leach various poisonous gases as they heat and melt. It gets worse the closer to the ground you are. It's part of the reason the buildings are all on gravelates, Obi-Wan concluded. Presumably, yes. Longest recommended exposure time is 30 minutes without any ill effects. The twins will have to stay on the ship then, Padme said, mostly to himself. Rex chose to interpret his words as orders anyway. Yes, sir. Rex could see the wide landing platform they were heading for. He spied Skywalker's small Jedi starfighter in one corner. The platform was one of several that fed into an expansive complex. Rex could see a fuzzy blue halo around the entirety of the complex, and the landing platforms it became more intense toward the bottom. The grav lifts and heat shields. What's the plan, Padme? Obi-Wan asked once they visually confirmed Anakin's starfighter. I'm going to talk to her alone. I can talk her down, calm her, and get her into the ship. When she sees the twins, I know she'll come back. And you, Padme pointed a threatening finger at Kenobi, will not approach her, or instigate an argument with her, or even look at her until we know she's calmed down. Got it? General Kenobi said nothing, but nodded. What about me, sirs? Keep the twins safe, Rex, both Amidala and Kenobi said in unison. They shared a look before Padme continued. If the atmosphere is toxic to adults, it'll be terrible for them. The ship's air is filtered. They'll be fine here. But they are not to leave the ship, no matter what. Rex pressed his lips together. He could be more used as a guard to Amidala, or even as an additional voice to talk Skywalker down. Instead, he was relegated to playing babysitter again. I understand, sir. I put them down for a nap. Hopefully they'll sleep through this whole ordeal. A mechanical wail filled the ship as the landing gears deployed. Time was up. It was time to face Skywalker and whatever she had become. The three gathered in the common room. After the ship touched down, Padme issued the sharp command to stay before he hurried down the loading ramp. A couple uncomfortable minutes passed while Rex and General Kenobi hovered out of eyesight of the doorway. They had all agreed that ambushing Skywalker in her current state could be a deadly mistake. but General Kenobi's hand kept drifting down to his lightsaber as if he expected to use it at any second. That only put Rex more on edge, and he had to cross his arms tightly to keep from picking up his own blasters. He strained to hear anything of what was going on outside, but Skywalker and Amidala were speaking too softly to be heard. Suddenly, Kenobi tensed, and a tight, uneasy expression crossed his face. Rex, go guard the children. Sir, now. Rex didn't wait for the orders to be repeated. He could almost feel the tension in Kenobi's words, which meant talking wasn't working. He hurried through the ship and threw up a defensive position in the doorway of the twins' room. Rex didn't like this. He really didn't like this. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to act. Mustafar was a known separatist outpost. It was hostile territory. Skywalker was unhinged. Padme was unarmed. General Kenobi was unnerved. And Rex was watching the twins sleep. This was what nanny droids were for, or that psychothantic protocol droid. Rex was a soldier. He should be out there too, protecting the senator. He was no Jedi, but even Rex could feel that there was something seriously wrong with his planet and this whole situation, but his orders were to protect Anakin's children, and he would do that even if he didn't like it. He owed the general that much. Rex could hear voices now outside the ship, muffled through the hall. He could differentiate between the senator and Skywalker, but he couldn't decipher the words. Their conversation was tense and rising in volume. Rex could clearly hear them now, and suddenly a third joined, General Kenobi. Let him go, Anakin. Rex jumped as something very solid hit the ship with enough force to make it shudder. That was it. Orders or not, Rex was going out there to help. With one quick glance back to the twins to ensure that they were still sleeping, Rex readied his blasters and strode out for the ramp. He stopped just shy of the opening, pausing to listen. Instinctive training overriding his dread. Rex had a good enough survival instinct to know better than to run into an unknown situation. Anakin was shouting now. There was a fury and fear in her voice that the clone had never heard before, not even in their most desperate battles. You will not take them away from me. Rex peered around the corner. The Jedi were facing each other, and the senator was out of sight. Rex had a sinking feeling about what exactly had hit the ship. Obi-Wan was still and collected, standing resolutely in front of the ship. Anakin was pacing back and forth like a cornered predator. There was a dangerous look to her, a complete loss of control. Rex had never seen her like that. Kenobi was right. Skywalker had lost her mind. Kenobi kept speaking to her, trying in vain to talk her down. The general could talk all he wanted, but Skywalker was beyond reason. She had broken mentally. She had attacked her husband. Rex stepped back, waiting. If he revealed himself now, he'd probably get himself or someone else killed. Skywalker was feeling ambushed and cornered. Revealing another supposedly hostile party would only make things worse. Rex just hoped the senator wasn't too seriously injured. Then an enraged howl cut through the air. Rex heard lightsabers ignite. He knew Skywalker had attacked Kenobi. By the time he looked back around the corner, the Jedi were already no more than a blur of clashing blades, moving away from the landing platform. Rex hurried down the ramp, nearly tripping over Kenobi's discarded robe, and looked around. Padme's crumpled body lay on the ground just a few yards from the ship's ramp. Senator! Rex knelt beside the downed man and checked him over. Senator Amidala, can you hear me? His pulse was weak, and Rex didn't like the labored wheeze of his breath, possibly broken ribs. Who knew what other damage? If Skywalker had done this to her husband, Rex cast a glance over his shoulder to the refinery the Jedi had dueled their way into. Kenobi and Skywalker together were a nigh unstoppable force. Against each other, he had seen them spar many times before. Damage could be done when they were both holding back. They would tear this place apart. Skywalker's astromech beeped beside him, bearing the ship's first aid kit. Rex took the box and began digging through. It was fairly well stocked, backed up for small wounds, structures, disinfectant, and bandages, basic medications, a few pre-dose syringes of pain medicine. Rex fished out a syringe of morphine and immediately jabbed it into Padme. It might not be much, but it would help. Distantly, Rex heard alarm blare from the refinery. He wanted to follow the Jedi, investigate, make sure the generals were okay. He knew he couldn't. He had his orders. Protect them, Rex. Moving awkwardly, trying to keep the senator as still as possible, Rex lifted him up and carried him back into the ship. Padme released a small pained whine, but his breathing seemed to improve as the medication worked through his system. Rex carried him back to the room with the twins and laid him out on a bunk. Rex was thankful that they were still sleeping, because he didn't think he could handle crying babies on top of tending to Padme's wounds. R2-D2 had followed him dutifully with a first aid kit, and the senator's protocol droid fussed anxiously by the twins' bedside. Padme's breathing was still too shallow. Rex opened his shirt to get a better look. He didn't see any signs of severe breakage, no jutting bone or collapsed sections, and it didn't sound like there was a puncture, but not that he could treat those injuries anyway. The best he could do was wrap Padme's chest in a long elastic bandage to stabilize the fractures. Honestly, Rex wasn't sure using the elastic was the correct thing to do, but it seemed to help. A trained medic could probably work miracles from the first aid kit. Rex could practically hear Kix standing over his shoulder and scolding him on the sloppy bandaging. Of course, his brother was dead now. Kix would never play the medic Trump's rank card on him. He'd never know that Skywalker, their general, was gone, and had twins. Though, knowing Kix, he'd probably lose his mind over the fact that she had to have spent some time of her pregnancy in an active war zone. Pity. Kix probably would have adored the twins. After a minute, Padme's eyes opened, glassy and unfocused, but opened. Annie? Senator, can you hear me? Padme blinked and focused a bit more. He looked at Rex, quite confused, but breathed out a weak yes. You're injured, Senator. Try not to move. Padme bobbled his head weakly. It might have been an attempt at a nod. His eyes slid closed again. Rex grit his teeth and stepped back. There was nothing else he could do, and he didn't like being in the ship. I'm going to go find General Kenobi. The senator made no acknowledgement that he had heard. Rex looked to the droids and ordered them to watch the senator. Rex paused at the ship's ramp, ears straining for any kind of sound. He heard nothing. He drew a breath, rested one hand on his blaster, and walked outside. The heat hit him like a punch to the gut. Alarms continued to blare, and Rex could see globs of lava shooting high into the air and landing on the edges of the platform. The heat shields had failed, and Rex had a sinking feeling that the Jedi were responsible for that. But that how didn't matter. This platform wouldn't last forever. Even if it was the farthest removed piece of the refinery, he moved as close as he dared to the edge of the platform and looked around. The refinery was falling apart without the heat shields. and the Jedi were nowhere to be found. Rex turned and scanned the sky. He could hardly see anything through the noxious smog, but there didn't appear to be any approaching crafts. A glob of lava splashed down on the deck and a few feet from Rex, far too close for comfort. He retreated to his ship, scooping up Kenobi's lost robe, and resolved to give the Jedi 5 more minutes before he took the ship to look for them. To stop himself from going to the bridge and taking off immediately, he checked on a sender. Padme was still breathing shallowly, eyes closed, looking pale and sickly. The wheezing had stopped, though. Suddenly, both of the twins started wailing, screaming as loud as their small lungs would allow, as if they had been seriously injured. Rex hurried to their bedsides, along with the protocol droid, and looked over them helplessly. They didn't seem hurt, but after the last 3 days, he knew they didn't just burst into tears without reason. He picked up one of them, the boy, and tried to quiet him. Some clones had picked up Django's more parental instincts. He definitely hadn't. He had no idea what to do to make the baby stop crying. He didn't have time to try and go through their entire routine. Rex, let me see him. Padme's voice was weak, and his arm shook as he reached for Luke. Rex carried the child over, but it didn't help anything. Let me hold him. Padme's arm collapsed against his chest, but Rex laid the baby against him, draping Padme's arm across his back. Luke calmed somewhat, but continued to cry. Rex went to pick up Leia and tried to soothe her. Padme couldn't hold both children, not in his condition. And even though they weighed next to nothing, he was concerned by the pressure on Padme's damaged ribs. Still, the contact seemed to be helping soothe one child. Several minutes passed. Eventually, Luke stopped crying. Leia was still wailing. Padme had lost consciousness again, or lacked the strength to keep his eyes open. Moving carefully, Rex switched out the twins. Luke protested and fussed, but didn't return to full cries. Rex! General Kenobi! He stepped out of the room and almost ran into the Jedi. The general looked awful. Rex had seen him after difficult battles more times than he cared to count, but he had never seen him like this. Physically, he had fared pretty well. A few minor burns were the worst he could see, but he could tell there was something irreparable damage inside of him. Kenobi looked like he barely had the strength left to stand, but he picked up Luke out of Rex's arms. The baby began wailing anew at this interruption. Get us in the air, Rex. Yes, sir. Where are we going? Polis Massa. It's an asteroid colony. Coordinates are in a Navi computer. Rex hurried to the cockpit and slid into the pilot's seat. He could faintly hear the twins still crying from the back of the ship. He wasn't accustomed to piloting with such fancy starships. There was a lot of unnecessary junk in the control console. But fortunately, the principles remained the same. Takeoff was smooth, even with the heat of the lava causing unpredictable updrafts. The crying stopped as he hit the upper atmosphere. He was just pulling up to the coordinate to Polis Massa from the Navi computer when Obi-Wan slid into the co-pilot's seat. With an exhausted sigh, Rex waited until they were safely in hyperspace before questioning the Jedi. How did you get the twins to stop crying? I severed their bond to Anakin. They could feel her pain. You didn't kill her then. It was a statement, not a question. Rex couldn't recall a time when he had seen General Kenobi fail a mission. Then again, this wasn't just a mission. Obi-Wan heaved a tired sigh. She was badly injured. If she survives, I could consider it a miracle. You left her to suffer? That was surprising. Rex had spent the last few years in close acquaintances with the Jedi. If and when they had to take a life, they did so quickly. The Jedi had moral objection objections to inflicting deliberate pain. A cruelty like that was not something Kenobi would have done, or so he thought. Then again, perhaps it hadn't been cruelty, but mercy. Perhaps Kenobi hadn't been able to bring himself to deal with the final blow. He and Skywalker were very close, like siblings. You could have ordered me to finish the mission, sir. Rex knew what Skywalker had done, the crime she had committed, the danger she had posed to the galaxy. She needed to be eliminated for good of the Republic, regardless of former ties. If he had been given the order, he would have taken her life. A good soldier follows orders. Kenobi clenched his jaw and dropped his head into his hand. Rex had never seen him like this, so defeated. He may have escaped alive. Skywalker would most likely die. Senator Amidala and his children were safe, but this certainly couldn't be counted as a victory. The Jedi were gone. Palpatine had declared himself emperor. His brothers were going to be slaves to this new empire. If they weren't called out of the military in a few years. Rex reached up and traced the scar above his right temple. That chip mess with 5s had quite honestly frightened him, despite the Kaminoans assuring that it was nothing more than a simple inhibitor chip. He couldn't quite swallow it. Something so harmless wouldn't have driven Tup to murder a Jedi. It wouldn't have gotten 5s killed because he dared to remove it. Rex knew there was probably a glitch in his coding that wouldn't let him blindly accept the cloner's words. If he had ever brought it up to a Jedi or any but the select few of his brothers he trusted, he probably would have been sent back to Kamino for reconditioning. Despite the risk, he and a few other of the 501st had been scared enough to hijack a Medroid and have it remove their chips. Rex swallowed a new wave of anger and sorrow when he realized what removing the chip meant for his brothers. Skywalker taking him away from his men had probably saved his life. Any clone who refused to follow through with those orders had probably been gunned down alongside the Jedi. Kix, Jesse, Vin, gone now, undoubtedly. They had spent months on edge, wondering if anyone would notice the scar and put the pieces together. Now, he was so glad he had followed his instincts. Whatever had been programmed into those chips had been the reason they turned on their Jedi. Rex scowled at the Navi computer. Kenobi was right. They had all been manipulated by Palpatine. End of chapter.